The final change is to code section 5-22I, which is the purchase control. Currently, the statutory requirement is that anything above 17,500 needs to be approved or cannot be approved without having a resolution passed, or the current bid threshold of the borough is 44,000, the QPA. The proposed ordinance is to reduce that threshold from 44 to 4,000, which is allowable by state law, but it would then require anything that's above the $4,000 bid threshold or the QPA thresholds for professional service contracts to be approved by resolution by the council that might arise in the town. And so this also addresses some of those issues and provides basically a procedure on how to go about things that arise that are not necessarily spelled out for in the statutes.
But the last one that we went through, that is not the case.
What do you mean the left? What do you mean
The
that?
17,000, the 17,500 and 44.
So so the statute puts the threshold at 17,500, but allows for the municipality to lower that threshold by passing a resolution.
Right.
Which is what the borough is
Right,
proposing to do.
Right, and there's a balance here of our administrator being, she was.
There is, because
balance of running the government, running the day-to-day operations and kind of handcuffing. I don't see what the issue, I've not encountered any issues relative to that. And you're trying to run the government on a day-to-day basis.
it also turns into an efficiency issue because $4,000 is much lower than 17,500 or 44,000. So before things are agreed to or done on a day-to-day basis, they would have to come before the council for anything above that amount. So 4,000 is the amount that the borough's proposed. And so it is kind of a balance of efficiency versus transparency and council approval.
Christina, do you know of any towns that are that low?
I personally don't. The state statute has, they've set a standard and a lot of towns decide to stick with that. Some lower it. It varies, but I don't personally know of anything that's 4,000.
Yeah.
And to be clear, that's professional services only, not other goods and services, correct?
Well, some goods and services fall under professional services, so it would really depend on what exactly we're looking at.
I know a challenge that I have perceived, and again, I personally could be flexible on that dollar amount, that threshold amount, but the real concept here that I was requesting a reduction in the bid threshold, and primarily for professional service contracts. So broadly speaking, hiring an engineer, hiring an auditor or other professional service, firm, is that once the council had hired one of these organizations, the council kind of lost sight of how much was being spent. A recent example that I'll just throw it out there, just to give the folks a sense for what I'm wrestling with. We have right now one professional services firm provided us a proposal. We had a resolution very clearly defining the dollars, very clearly defining the scope. The scope was $72,000 a year. I went through invoices and it was very clear by council resolution, anything above that scope, any additional services would be deemed out of scope and would require a change order. I shared with the mayor last week one particular example I looked at that I actually identified in a review of the bills list on January 25th. I followed up to say, what is going on here? Why was this what appeared to be an additional spend made? It looks to me like we spent over more than $36,000 above what we had agreed to. There were additional services that this vendor provided. So I'm not questioning the vendor. I did question how was this authorized? It didn't come before the council. It was over the bid threshold. And there may be a very valid explanation, but I've asked a couple of times in the past week I still don't have a response, so I don't know why those dollars were authorized, but it begged the question to me. We have the right to reduce our bid threshold, and personally, I like the idea as a steward of taxpayer dollars. I like the idea of the council reviewing spend in excess of a certain threshold, for the time being, call it $4,000. And we say, if we question that, if we say, why are we doing this? We don't think it's appropriate. Yes, it's inefficient in that we spent more time on something we wouldn't have before, but we have a chance to avoid that spend if it's not in the best interest of our public. So again, I'm not lobbying specifically for 4,000 versus 5 or 7, whatever. But I was lobbying for a lower threshold because I feel like we're not necessarily controlling the spend as efficiently and effectively as we can.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't agree with that because, our administrator, I think, does keep an eye on the dollars. I think that does operate within appropriate parameters. The example you're using, we know we had a significant issue around some of our financial services that were financial transactions over the last few years. So a lot of work's gone into that, and that's the service that was provided. We also had to pay, but we all knew that those analysis were being done. The BA kept below. We didn't know that we were doing financial analysis.
No, the first time I saw a payroll assessment was on January 25th on the bills list, and at that moment in time, I questioned it because it was something I had not.
But if I go back to last year, we said we had significant issues with payroll and paying people and the way we were paying people. So that analysis is what followed that concern that was raised. We've not, the BA has not gone over a threshold. The direction we gave her was to clean it up, fix it, and get it squared away, and we're almost there. But there's parts of what might seem to be not approved was a significant issue that was addressed by our financial services company. And again, we're almost to a point where we can start making those determinations. So
well, as far as I can tell, Mr. Mayor, we knew there were payroll issues. The council was not approached to say, we have a contract for $72,000 that you approved, council. We want to spend another $36,000. Do you give us your approval again? We were not asked to give that additional approval. As I understand local public contracts law, anything over $44,000 should have come to the borough council. And this is one example I pulled off a bills list, made me realize the council loses sight of the spend once we hire the vendor. And I wanted to ensure that the council had more of an opportunity to review significant additional spend. Now, again, whether it's 4,000 or 6,000, I don't care. I want it to be a much lower threshold. And we're talking about 17.5, but honestly, the threshold has been 44,000 because our QPA is allowed to approve things over up to 44,000. So I'm suggesting we go not from 17.5 to 4, but I'm suggesting from at the current moment in time, 44,000.
no, there's a difference in 17.5 and 44. Those are two different thresholds. And again, the BA is operated within those thresholds. So there's nothing that the BA or myself or anybody in the administration has done that's violated those thresholds. I think part of what we've got here.
I'm sorry.
Finish.
Well, you just made a statement that I think is wrong. I mean, can you clarify?
Well,
Nothing has been done that violated those thresholds. I just stated it. I sent you an email a week ago. I still have not gotten a response.
that doesn't mean that something's been violated. So I wouldn't want you to make an assertion or assert something or make that kind of aspersion. It's not the case. You're basically saying that the BA is violated.
I asked the question and
And you will get an answer to that question. I think part of what's going on, which has been somewhat of a slippery slope since last May, is defining, what's the executive branch of a local government. You could take it at a federal level or at a local level, and what's the legislative. I believe that the administration's operated within those parameters. And this gray area, you know, where this leaching one way or the other has been a move, you know, stressing away from the executive into the legislative, whereas the legislative, yes, it's a check and a balance, but it's not a managerial function. And what I kind of see here is it's becoming a managerial function and it shouldn't be. So that's my view. I'll leave it at that.
I would say, everything that Mr. Cannon and his firm has provided to us today is legally feasible. The firm would not provide this council with any guidance that was not legal, not appropriate. So we can all have somewhat differing opinions, but I think, and there have been many times where I've disagreed with Mr. Cannon's opinions on issues, but I think ultimately every member of this council has to ultimately respect the opinion he gives us. And in this case, everything that we're discussing today, he's had some challenges that members of this governing body have pushed back very aggressively at Mr. Cannon. I would say he's been under fire to make sure he gives us a very accurate representation of what he believes is the best legal response. And Ms. Melvin, I'm speaking for him only because he's not here, but really, I would ask you to offer any comment you could to clarify.
Yes, I mean, all of the suggestions or proposed amendments are legal. I think it's just more so of an efficiency balance that needs to be addressed, but that's, you know, that's all, you know, the mayor and council's decision.
Comments?
Yeah, comment. I think in the example given, you know, we all knew there were payroll problems from the past. We all knew it was going to take a lot of work to fix it, and we basically gave that direction to do that. But I agree that you know, once it crossed a certain amount, a dollar amount, it should have come back to the council and said, in order for us to address this, we're going over the size of this contract that we have with those CFO's company. So I mean, I agree that we should do it. In that example, it should have come back. You know, yes, we could argue about what is the number, but as he said, it is running the government efficiently or transparency. Like I like the idea of having more transparency. So this is something that you know, I'm willing to take a look at, give it a try. I'd argue about the number.
I wouldn't use the word transparency, but that's just me.
Well, it says right in our attorney's memo that what we're doing is balancing efficiency of running the government with transparency. So if you have an issue with the word transparency, you can take it up with Greg because he wrote the memo. I guess Christina, you helped him write it. So, but that word's in the memo. So,
Thanks.